Don't watch this video because this video is the worst video you're gonna watch on YouTube, so... Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about something that a lot of producers are struggling with, and that is to get your kick drum to sound right. By the way, all the sounds in this tutorial are from our own sample packs and you're welcome to check them out. The link is right there below. Do yourself a favor, go get it.
So here are 10 tips to get the perfect sounding kick drums. Tip number 1, there is no perfect kick drum. And this, in my opinion, is the most important tip of them all. A kick drum should be relevant to the track that it belongs to. And that's why we need at least one more channel for it to be relevant to. In this case, let's choose this bass line. Tip number 2, kick selection. So I'm going to insert all these transient sample pack kicks into an Ableton drum rack. It's very important that all of the kicks are set to the same volume, otherwise you won't really be able to compare between them. And then I start this elimination process. And I try to stick with only the kicks that I think are potentially good for the track. Eventually the point is to stay with a very small amount of kicks and work only on these. Tip number 3, tuning. Now, in no way is this a must. However, in some styles of music, especially dance music, a kick drum takes such a large part of the track that I think it's important to be aware of the harmonics that it provides. Sometimes you'll want it at the track's root key, sometimes you'll just want a different key that fits the scale, and sometimes even a completely detuned kick. It's going to be much easier to hear the note if you use some sort of pitch shifting plugin. Right now we're listening to the kick 3 octaves higher. That way it's very easy to realize which notes fit and which don't. But eventually you should make the decision when you're listening to the kick drum in its natural octave. Of course, you can step it up a notch, like I'm doing here with the detune, and get it to sound even more precise. Tip number 4, length. Now this sometimes may be tricky to hear, especially because we're dealing with low frequencies. The longer the kick is, the more bass it's going to produce, but sometimes it's going to clash with other low frequency playing instruments, especially bass lines. So unless you have a really great listening environment, I would suggest something like this technique, which is using a low pass filter to hear only the very low frequencies. That way it's much easier to focus on actually how much bass is playing, and you'll be able to hear when the kick is too long or too short. Sometimes when a kick, for example, is too short, you may end up compensating with unnecessary volume. So it's really important to get the right length for your kick drums. Make sure to also play with the angle of the fade itself. Tip number 5, attack. Now this can work both ways, but I suggest trying to play with the kick starting point and its attack in order to get different types of character. Basically, the more attack you give it, the softer it's gonna sound, and in some cases it just may be the kick that you're looking for, while in other cases it may be the opposite. It is, however, definitely something to be aware of. Tip number 6, compression. In this case, it's also really important that we're listening to the kick together with the bass line, because you can really hear how much punch is actually needed for the kick to really be present in the mix. So usually I'll use something like 10 or 30 or even more milliseconds for the attack time, if the compressor allows it, and a very fast release. And once I feel that the compressor behavior is beneficial to the kick, I can use the mix knob to set the amount just right. Keep in mind that you should be very accurate with this because it will take low frequencies off the kick drum. Tip number 7, making room for the kick. There's so much to be said about sidechaining, and there's actually a link below for a sidechaining tutorial if you want to check it out. But basically, one of the key methods to get your kick drum to be more present in the mix is actually making room for it by modifying the other channels that are playing together with it. This compressor is affected only from the kick's high frequencies, and that's why it's reacting pretty fast, but there are still faster things like this LFO tool. In this case, we're making room only for the very first milliseconds of the kick, which are actually the transient itself. And if you do that to a few things, not only the bass line, for example, you can try it on hi-hats, it will definitely make more room for the kick drum. Of course, you can blend between different sidechaining techniques. Make sure to compensate with volume, because every type of these effects is going to take some volume away. And now we can hear the before and the after. Tip number 8, character. You can use any type of effect on kick drums. One of the most common ones is distortion. You can really find the right color and frequencies that will complement your kick drum. Here it is before, and here it is after. In these cases, it's really a matter of personal taste, but I feel that this is a great way to make your kick sounding even more relevant to the other channels playing together with it. Tip number 9, reverb. Some kick drums, maybe something like a 707 kick drum, which is very short, can sometimes really benefit from a reverb. Of course, you have to experiment with setting the reverb itself. For example, because we're dealing with low frequencies here, maybe using a mono reverb may help. Or maybe just playing only the low frequencies in mono. Here's an example of what it sounds like with the bass line when it's playing without reverb, as opposed to with. Tip number 10, EQing. If you really put a lot of effort, such as we did in finding the right kick drum, then your EQs should only slightly enhance the frequencies that are beneficial to making the kick being even more present. Sometimes you can cut some low frequencies, experiment with using linear phase and different types of EQs. We hope these tips will be helpful for you. Of course, we totally recommend to experiment with your kick drums as much as possible. For example, manipulating the pitch envelopes, maybe even trying to create them yourself using plugins like this Kick 2, for example, or any synthesizer, VST or analog, just to understand the basics of the kick drum itself, and that way you can come up with your own kick drums.
For more videos like this one, subscribe to our channel, and of course, if you want to see anything else, any other technique, or just any tip you want to talk about, let us know in the comment section below. See you next time.